Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, and buonasera, laziali around the world. Here for an incredible episode to preview the upcoming season. I am Sean McIntosh, co-host here of Lazio World, joined by Mr. Caleb Adams. How you doing, Caleb?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Man, I can't complain. We are a week away from Lazio kicking off, so I'm pretty excited to chat about this upcoming season, and we've got a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. So let's jump right in. I think the first thing I want to do is talk about the mercato. It's obviously what takes up everybody's time, takes up everybody's heart. It drains everybody with the ups and downs, the roller coaster that is the transfer market, and
hmm
and there's been a ton of activity, across Serie A. It's been nice because the past 2 weeks or so, Lazio has been one of the most active clubs in Serie A, which always comes as a surprise. Maybe a little bit too late for our liking, but I want to talk about it. It's obviously a big part of the season and a big part of what we need to discuss as we think about this preview. So, first thing I'm going to do is we're going to grade the mercato, but I think it's important when we talk about grading the mercato that we can't necessarily just do it in a vacuum.
Yeah, yeah.
And towards the end of this episode, we're going to give our top six predictions. And, we have to be able to look at everybody, what they're looking like in comparison to last season, the players they brought in, the players that they lost. So we're gonna start with that. I'm gonna give a run through on everybody's mercato as far as the top clubs, the clubs that are expected to have an impact in the race to the top four and all of the European spots. So, we're going to start with top players that come in, and then some of those players that have exited for your top clubs. And we'll start with Milan. I think Milan has been arguably the most active club on the market, especially with what they brought in. Let's look at the players coming in, starting at the top in terms of the money that they've spent. You've got Christian Pulisic, $20 million player coming in. Samuel Chukwueze, Yunus Musa, Reisner's, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Noah Okafor, uh, another player we're very familiar with, Luca Romero, who came in on a free. In terms of
Yeah.
players they lost, they were able to fund most of these signings from the sale of Sandro Tonali to Newcastle, who had a brilliant performance, in his Premier League debut this weekend. They lose Rebic and then Zlatan, who retired.
Mm.
That's their window. Looking at Inter bring in Turam on a free, Aslani for 10 million, Jan Bisek and Jan Sommer, their new starting goalkeeper,
hmm
Davide Frattesi, Juan Cuadrado on a free, and then the players that they lose: Andre Onana, big sale to Manchester United, Brozovic to Saudi Arabia, Milan Skriniar, Gagliardini, which I know Inter fans are excited to get rid of, and then
hmm
Dzeko. Napoli, uh, probably up there with Juve in terms of the least amount of activity. They
hmm
bring in Natan, who is slated to be their uh, Kim Min Jae replacement, and then Kajuste out, as I mentioned, Kim Min Jae, and then heavily reported that Zielinski is close to agreeing on a deal that'll see him leaving to Saudi Arabia. That's still up in the air. So right now you can kind of pencil in Zielinski being a loss for them.
Okay.
Juve, maybe the only club that's done less work than Napoli in the market. Right now, the only player that they've essentially brought in is Timothy Weah, and then they're losing Angel Di Maria and Juan Cuadrado. Uh, we know there's a good chance they're going to be losing a couple players to us, but
Mm.
in terms of those players directly affecting what Juve was last year in terms of a change, those are two players that didn't figure in their
Yeah.
plans, loaned out to other clubs. So not even counting those as a loss. So Atalanta very active, especially with the money that they've spent for a club like Atalanta. It's been absolutely brilliant. Let's start with El Bilal Toure for $28 million. They bring in their new, what should be their starting striker in Gianluca Scamacca at 25 million, and then Mitchell Bakker losing Rasmus Holland, which a big loss, but I think replacing him with a Scamacca will be really interesting. And then Jeremy Boga, two players that they're losing. Roma, they bring in a few players. Most of their work has been on the free. Bringing Evan Indika, Hussein Awar, and then Rasmus Christensen. Their big sale, which is a blow to us, Laziali, our very own Roger Ibanez is
Sad.
out, having been sold to Saudi Arabia. So, yep,
Sad.
sad day
That's
for us.
tragic.
And then Lazio. Let's talk about Lazio. The players that we are bringing in: Tati Castellanos for 15 million, Daichi Kamada on a free, Gustav Isaksen at 12 million, and then the two players who I don't like to count my eggs or my chickens before they hatch, but the documents have been submitted. Milan was reported to have made some inquiries at the last minute. Everything reportedly is essentially as close to being finished as it can be. I usually don't like to talk about players coming in until we see the posts on Twitter and Instagram with the scarves being held up. But by all accounts, we should be seeing that news by Tuesday at the latest. And that is the news that Luca Pellegrini and Nicolo Rovella are coming to Lazio on some really, really great business. It looks like it'll be around 21, 22 million. Has the opportunity to balloon a little bit up with some bonuses in that. But two players that will technically be on loan in year one with obligations to buy for year two. So, for purposes of our conversation, when we speak about the Mercato and when we're previewing and talking about Lazio, let's assume that those are two players that should be factoring in. And then as far as players lost from last year, Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, obviously having been sold to the Saudis for 40 million. Raul Moro, or I'm sorry, not Raul Moro, but Luca Romero, having lost him on a free to Milan. And then, of course, our bandiere, Stefan Radu, having retired from the club. So those three are the big losses for us. And so let's take a step back. Let's talk about the Mercato. Caleb, how are you grading this? Give me a letter grade from A to F, and then how do you stack it up in comparison to some of these other teams?
The tricky part about this is like relative to other teams, right? For me, I would give it an A minus. And the reason I add a little minus to it would be because of timing. I would have much preferred these to be done much earlier, to get these deals done across the line, a month ago, 2 weeks ago. But better late than never. And I'll say that coming in when we lost Milinkovic-Savic, we were going to need two midfielders to replace him, period, in my opinion. It was like, what with the kind of budget that we have, it would be impossible to spend the kind of money to replace Milinkovic-Savic on one signing, because simply those players are all 80 mil plus right now. So for us, we got two players that sort of have different profiles. First of all, we have Kamada, who's an attacking midfielder, fills that sort of attacking void that Milinkovic leaves, right? And then we also brought in Rovella, who is the more true box-to-box and more of a complete sort of a box-to-box midfielder. So I'm really happy with that. We finally got a backup striker for Immobile, after we've been asking for one since even like the winter window. And then Pellegrini, we need a left back, and he's a guy that bleeds blue, young still, has already been in the system for 6 months. So for me, I'm ecstatic really about the window. And I think we've really filled pretty much every single kind of position, even the winger position we've also improved upon.
Yeah, I think if I'm giving it a grade, I'm really close. I'm giving it I'm giving it a B plus, and timing, as you mentioned, for me is a big one. I would have loved to just have seen us get these guys in, because I don't want to see us in a situation where we were last year in terms of dropping matches so early in the season
Mm,
that we end up looking back on and look, the gap between Napoli and us in second last year was wide enough that you can say it didn't mean anything. But Serie A this season could be the closest it's been in a decade plus,
yeah,
in terms of just top to bottom, from top, at least for the races of top four. I think the race for the Scudetto could be really, really close. So last thing I want to do is start the campaign where guys aren't ready
yeah,
and end up dropping points. So, that's where I dock them maybe a little bit harsher than you.
mhm,
And the positive is that last year's Mercato was tremendous in terms of allowing Sadi to have the players that he needs,
yeah,
retooling our back line, and taking a step forward. And I was really, really nervous that we weren't going to follow that up with another strong summer window. It was really strong. Ilitare, there's a lot of mixed feelings about him
yeah,
as a sporting director. And
mhm,
look, no different than many sporting directors. You win some, you lose some. And so I was a little bit nervous about Lotito maybe operating on his own, and
yeah,
and hats off, because we were able to get absolute quality. And I still think there's a little bit of work to do in the market. Maximiano looks like he's on the verge of being sold to Almeria. Still some work to be done there, but if that happens, right, you have to assume, you have to hope that we've already got that backup keeper in our pocket to be able to
yeah,
make quick work of some negotiations and get that done, because that's going to be really, really important. And I still think that we need another Mezzala, and I would love to. And I say greedy. It's more because I understand the expectations of this club.
yeah,
Uh, but I think we need to go into the season with another center back, because if we lose immediately, if there's injury and we lose Casale or Romagnoli, unless Hila has made a big step forward, it's Patrick. And
mhm,
look, I'll go on record and say he's my least favorite player, probably of the last 5+ years.
yeah,
He's made massive improvements in the past couple seasons, but
yeah,
there are still those moments that remind me of the player that he was, and I just, we can't be in Champions League matches with Patrick as a starting center back, and so that's where I think, in order for me to see this as an A, I need a little bit more work to be done before the close of business. But I will say a B plus. I think when you look at all of the other teams, I think it's, I want to say easy, and of course the fans of every other team will gladly disagree, but I think only Milan can be the team that we can talk about as having had a better mercato than Lazio.
yeah,
Atalanta has done some really great business. I think you can talk about what they've done, but I think we've got quality, and we've got number of players that have come
yeah.
in that have all of a sudden given us a little depth.
We
So
got 5 players. I
yeah,
mean, and not just like three just mid. Like every sort of player for me has a real true purpose in the squad, right? For me, like even like maybe the most, for you and I believe like our most sort of like sort of kind of signing is Isaksen, right? But
yep,
even him, it's very clear, like, hey, Pedro's getting older. We're gonna need another winger to step up. So instead of getting some like mid-tier older veteran, hey, no, let's actually invest in some youth, give them some minutes. So for me, what I like about this mercato is that there seems to be a clear direction for every single
yep,
position and player we're getting. That's what I like. Sometimes you've made signings or teams make signings that it's just like for the sake of making a signing. and you're just like what's like why we don't really need it, or like he doesn't really fit for the long term or short term plan. But for me, it very much feels like every signing that we brought in this window has a real true purpose in the roster. It's like there's a very clear plan of like even the Castellanos signing is, Immobile is a number one, without a doubt. But again, he's getting older. He struggled with injuries last season, and we're bringing in a striker that isn't so much more. It isn't really so much more potential, but it's sort of that in the middle of lockdown starter and potential sort of player. Someone that's right there who just needs a good run of games to maybe be that starting striker for us in the long in like the next 2-3 years, right? So even like Castellanos is a good example, because you don't want to bring in a striker that's 19 years old to back up Immobile, because like you're gonna drop off a lot of experience and quality in
Yep.
that way. It's too big of a gamble. So Castellanos is like a perfect in between sort of player where he's not reached his peak yet, but he has enough experience and production in his career already that it's like, hey, this guy can definitely step in and help us, and it's not so much of a gamble. So that's for me part of the reason also why I gave him an A minus, is just that for me it's a very clear direction in every single signing that we brought in. There's not one where I'm like, like, do we really need that? Every single one for me has like very clear purpose and intent, which is what I love to see. And considering we're doing that without a sporting director, like,
Yeah.
honestly, it surprises me. I'm genuinely impressed with Lotito, because I'm like, it normally goes really bad when the president starts taking control of stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean that point I was going to make it. I was going to make just that point was
Mm.
particularly impressive without having a sporting director. And
Yeah,
I don't know. We got the question on Twitter of who is our sporting director, and a question regarding that. And by all accounts, it is Lotito operating. Now, Angelo Fabiani was reported, and he's at the club at like a executive position for our academy and Primavera and the youth sector and scouting. Now, there was a lot of reports that he was supposed to be the one to step up
Mm.
in place of Tade. So I have to assume somebody's helping Lotito out a little
Oh,
bit.
for sure. Yeah.
But it's been absolutely brilliant in terms of having a plan, or at least it appears that they have a plan. And the end result, whether or not they have a plan or not, the end result is really, really good, and would appear that there's a plan, because all of the signings, to your point, have shown
Mm.
a place on the team. We don't have a question when we signed uh, when we signed, and now I'm blanking on his name, but when we signed our striker from Turkey, and maybe it's because of the lack of goals, but I he made no sense for us,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
It
Exactly.
made no tactical sense for this club from the amount
Muri-
of
Murici.
Murici, yeah, Murici. I already want to forget about him, but
Me too.
it made no tactical sense. But every
Yeah.
single signing to this point, and now they've got to prove it, of course. But when you
Mm.
look at their strengths, when you look at their abilities, the positions, they're all positions of need. You can see them ultimately having a place at the squad, having an important place on this squad. The one that you can maybe argue about is Kamada in terms of how he'll fit with the Luis Alberto, but there is so much class there that you just don't even it just you don't even worry about it, because
Yeah.
he's going to come in and he's going to figure it out. So yeah, I think incredible mercato. So let's look now, because again we're going to get to a place where we're going to give our top six predictions.
Yeah.
Let's analyze this club. So um, we're going to go through each position, and we're going to give our take on whether this is a position in which we feel stronger. So is this an upgrade going into this season compared to last, or
Mm.
is it a downgrade? I'm
Mm.
not even going to give us a cop out. We're not going to even allow ourselves to say flat,
Oh,
right?
really?
So
Oh, okay.
look, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And
Yeah, that's
so
fair.
we're going to have to stick to either we are improved, we're going to see an improvement, we are upgrading, or we are downgrading. So,
Mm.
Caleb, let's start at the goalkeeper position. Right now it's Provedel. Maximiano is a question mark. Do we feel like we're going to have an improvement upon that position? We're talking about a player that saw himself as the goalkeeper of the season last year, breakout player, breakout signing for us. Are we going to be better in that position or worse?
Uh if Maximiano goes, I think we're worse, assuming that he leaves. I mean, there's something especially we leave if he leaves, then we're worse.
Okay.
But for me, it's like I don't know if you saw pretty recently here. It was a quote from uh ah some famous person, some famous footballer. I forgot his name, but he had this hot take of why do you need two elite keepers to go at each other, because it puts unnecessary pressure on your primary keeper who already has to think about saving stuff. Anyways, point is, there's a whole conversation, but worse. On
Okay.
paper, worse.
I,
Yeah.
I will I will also say worse.
Uh-huh.
And my reason has nothing to do with Maximiano because look, he didn't play last year. I,
Right?
I feel and right now I'm at probably the most confident I've ever been in our ability to reinvest and find
Mm.
players. So if we sell Maximiano for the 10 million that Lotito is seeking, I feel
Yeah.
really good that we'll be able to get a player of quality enough to serve as backup.
Right.
The reason why I say worse is because it's going to be really hard to improve upon the phenomenal season that Provedel had last year.
Yes.
Again, he
Yes.
was voted on as keeper of the season last year, and it's going to be hard to top that.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I say maybe a slight step back
Same.
on where we were last year. So
Agreed.
all right, so I'll give you the benefit of going second for this one, but let's talk about the back line. So last year, a back line that consisted of Hisai, a typical starting 11 would see us, with Hisai at the left back position, our two center backs, Casales, Romagnoli, and then Marusic. Or we would see Marusic on the left with a Lazzari at right back.
Mhm.
This year, I think we've got Pellegrini back, so he obviously was here at the winter window. Didn't see too much time on the left side, but when he came in, I know you and I were both really impressed with him. I think another season of Casales and Romagnoli playing together, in which they were arguably the best center back pairing in the league last year. Two players that were absolutely snubbed by former Azzurri manager Roberto Mancini. Great news for great news for Lazio fans that want to see their players for the national team. I know a lot of people would prefer keeping those players off the national team to reserve them, keep their energy levels high for the Serie A campaign. But as a fan of the Azzurri, personally, I want to see those players playing for their national team. So I think today was great news for the likes of Romagnoli, Casale, and Zaccagni. But
Yeah.
I think another season playing together, understanding Sadi, I'm going to have that as being an upgrade. Particularly, I love bringing in Pellegrini. I hope that when we're running on all cylinders, that he is our starting left back. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go ahead and say upgrade. What do you got?
I got upgrade as well. And for all the reasons you listed, I'm gonna add one other little reason that you may not like, but it's facts. And I do think that again, our backup center backs are questionable, big question mark still. However, I do think the best version of Patrick that I have seen was last season's version. I'm not saying he's ideal, great, but I'm saying he does seem a little better under Sadi. He does seem like a little bit less of a liability. And so, on top of all those reasons you said as well, plus Patrick, I think improving a bit. Yeah. Had to
Patrick is going to give his best Nesta impression in Champions League. You heard it here first from Caleb.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, man. I just had to put that out there. But no, I think that our back line is only going to improve this year. That's one of the big, I think we were the best defensively last year, period. That's what carried our campaign. and I think it will only improve this campaign as well. And I do think Pellegrini is a big upgrade, and will help get more out of this defense. And we'll go into starting lineup, so who we think is optimal, and kind of
Yeah.
talk more about that. But yeah, upgrade for me as well.
Okay, let's talk midfield. You kick us off. Upgrade, downgrade.
Oh man, this is the one I really the only one I've struggled with. I think every other one's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. From midfield, I'm gonna say upgrade.
Wow.
I'm going to
Okay.
say upgrade, and that may be a bit of a hot take, maybe a little bit of a warm take, but I'm going to say that we are going to be less dependent on this one player than we were before, and so I believe we were incredibly dependent on Milinkovic-Savic last year in general. And I believe that with the additions that we've brought in, we'll not only be more flexible, we'll also be less dependent on someone like Milinkovic-Savic, less dependent on one player in our midfield. And so for that reason, I say upgrade. Of course, the biggest question mark here is this is really the main position where it's a TBD. On paper, I'm saying that. But this is the biggest question mark in terms of, hey, we're assuming that these guys are going to be upgrades. We're assuming they're going to pop off in Serie A, however, or at least for Lazio in this case. And for that reason, why it was so difficult to sort of guess. But I strongly believe that we have upgraded ever so slightly. Not saying it's a massive upgrade, but we have upgraded. And I believe it's because we are going to be less dependent and more flexible than how we were with having Milinkovic-Savic on the team.
Yeah, I think. Look, I agree in that this is probably the hardest one to put a finger on. Um, as I mentioned, in terms of grading our mercato, I think there is some work to be done for me to feel like it was an A, and the work that needs to be done will also largely direct my answer here because I think we need a Medsala. We need another box to box.
Yeah.
I think if we can sell Basic and use that money to get a stronger player,
Yeah.
then I think this is an improvement. And I think it's probably tough for a lot of people to digest. And you mentioned it, like we had arguably the best midfielder in the league, and we lost him this year, so it's a big hole. But I will also say, and it can't be forgotten, and this is no slight on the player. I've got his shirt hanging up right there. Love the player, massive club legend.
Yeah.
But after the World Cup, from the winter to the rest of the season, he was not the same player.
He was
There
not.
was a lot of times that it was hard to pinpoint, why he wasn't playing at his best. Was it a disinterested player? Was it a player that maybe knew he wasn't going to be coming back? I'm not in his head. I don't know why. But the fact is he wasn't the best player. He wasn't the best midfielder in the league the second half of the season. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
knowing that we don't have a distracted Milinkovic-Savic and we have some talent and we have some world-class players
Motivated players too.
and motivated players, I think that is going to make a big, big difference. Now, I don't think we're going to see the best version of that midfield for a while.
That's
And
fair.
so it's going to take some time just understanding Saudi's system, understanding the league, playing with one another. I think it's going to be a little bit. So it's one
Yeah.
of those ones where I think we're gonna take a step back before we take a step forward. But I think that in the end, our midfield will be a lot better. It will have gotten younger. My hope is that we will see some of these players playing ahead of older players like a
Yeah.
Vecino.
Yeah.
And again, I think we need to sell Basic because I believe his time is
Yeah.
over. I think we've seen enough of him over the last 3 seasons to know he is not a player who's going to be an impact player at a team that has Champions League aspirations, top four aspirations like Lazio. And so if we were able to get a box to box player in replacement, I think we are a better midfield than last year.
Wait. So what's your final assessment?
So I'll say upgrade. I'll say upgrade.
Hey. All right.
I'll say upgrade.
All right.
It's again, it's a little bit of an asterisk. Like I do think we need some work to be done, but I think it'll be an upgrade in the end.
Okay.
So let's talk attack. You know,
You
this is
start.
gonna
You start this one.
okay. So for me, this is tough. Not as tough as midfield, but I do think it's tough because when we look at our attack,
This was
I
easy
think
for me. This was pretty straightforward to me.
yeah. Look, and here's the thing. It's let's talk about the positives. The positives are we have a Vice Immobile in Tati Castellanos that we're both high on. We know he's a versatile player that can slot in on the wing if needed, that can play out wide. He can play as a lone striker. He can play off of another player. So, in the event that Cheeto gets hurt, I think we will be fine. And we saw that we were fine last year with Felipe Anderson as well.
Yeah.
We never want to play without Cheeto, but I think we're better suited than we were last year to play
Yeah.
without Cheeto. So that to me is certainly an upgrade.
Yeah.
But the production we got last year from Felipe Anderson, I'm going to make a bold statement. We
Already
will
bring up the hot takes, huh?
we will not see that again because if we see that again, the man is not human. He played every minute, and so
Hey, you mean production and like numbers or like in like amount
in
like time played?
in just time played, like
Okay.
he was fantastic last year. He was he was probably the most underappreciated player because look, it's just the highlights are always going to come with a
Yeah.
Milinkovic Savic, a Luis Alberto, Cheeto bagging goals.
Yeah.
But the work that Felipe Anderson has put in, just being the most consistent, and consistency was his biggest problem at his first run at Lazio. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
he was
For sure.
incredibly consistent. Sadi has turned him into an incredible two-way player, and so it's hard, almost like what I said about Ivan Provedel. He was up here, and so expecting that again is going to be really, really tough. And it's going to be a player that has put in some mileage last season, so he's going to have to take a break this year.
Mm.
And so now it's about players that are unproven. Is Isaacson going to come in and provide an upgrade or provide equal quality? I think I'm pretty positive on the player. I mean, I saw some highlights today, and he looked really good in preseason. But again, it's a Serie C club that they were playing, but it's that's one thing that I question. Pedro, another year older. Zaccagni had some injury problems in his first year at Lazio, and so he managed to avoid a lot of that last year. So there are still some question marks. The optimist in me, and look, Cheeto's another year older as well. So
Yeah.
I will say, man, this is tough. I will say only because I want to be optimistic, but it's really, really tough. But I will say we are a slight improvement, and that is going to come from my belief in Tati Castellanos. We're going to have some hot takes later, and I'm still deciding if he's going to be in my hot take, but I'm really high on the player. So I'll say we are a slight, ever so slight upgrade on last season. Where do you got us?
For me, you made some great points and did give me some new perspective. However, for me, it was really easy to say upgrade, and I'll say it because, uh, well, a couple reasons. A, we're not gonna have to be so reliant on Felipe this year. So yes, you're right about, hey, we're not gonna be able to get that sort of like production play time from him again. Well, we don't need to do that again with the signings that we've made, right? Tati Castellanos, right at that position at the 9. I also think that we sold or let go of Luca Romero and replace him with a actual proven youngster, because Luca Romero he still hasn't done it at first team level in a lot of different places. He just hasn't. At least with Isaacson, Isaacson has shown, albeit in the Danish league, put a little asterisk there. It's still a decent league. But again, the Danish league has proven in the past to produce players that can transfer their skill set to the top 5 leagues. There's a lot of Danish players that play in the top 5 leagues and are excellent players. And they're consistently more than serviceable in these leagues, right? So it does have a good track history of producing players that work in these better leagues. and he has consistently improved production with every year he's been there. And now he's hit 22, and he had his best year at I can never pronounce the name of the team, but I think we've lost one youngster and replaced him with a youngster that is much more polished and has proven himself at a first team level before. And for those reasons, and again, we have Pedro still, Sakagni we still have here. I do think it's a pretty obvious upgrade for me in the attack.
Okay.
But you make good points though. And
yeah, look, there's things that need to go right for us,
yes.
and health is one of them.
Yes.
And if we can stay healthy, I'm confident. But that's going to be a question mark.
And I'll say one more thing too. Again, this is a second year 2 of Saudi ball.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
And so I do think as well that plays a factor in the attack. I mean, Kamada, Pellegrini play factors in the attack too, right? So we're not really considering these guys. We're just talking about personnel-wise, or in terms of personnel that we have upgraded. And I think along with Sadi, along with Sadi, and along with year 2 Sadi ball, and along with someone like Pellegrini, who's a little more progressive in the attack, can put in a ball, likes to get up, I think that we have upgraded.
Yeah. So look, we've broken down how we feel about each position at the team, and we haven't even covered depth. Look, I think we've improved on the depth side for sure.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what we think our optimal starting 11 will be. I think, and I say optimal because looking at how we'll start the first couple matches of the season, I believe it will be very different than what will end up being our best lineup. We're playing Lecce. I think I'll tell you. I think that starting 11 is going to be. You're going to see, and again, we need to make sure we're healthy. But I think you're going to see Vecino in the starting 11. I think you're going to see Luis Alberto, Cataldi, Vecino. If Cataldi's hurt, Vecino's going to end up playing in that position. I think you could very likely see Basic if he's not sold. I think I don't know that we would throw Kamada in there right off the bat. I think you're going to see a lot of what we saw last year. So, but let's talk optimal. Let's talk about, in order for us to be fighting for top 4, in order for us to see this season as a success, and how we see some of the new signings. Let's talk about what that lineup looks like. Caleb, you want to go ahead and give us your starting 11?
You want to do this like we talk about our back line. You say your back line. I say my midfield. You say your midfield.
Sure. Okay.
Providel, obviously goalkeeper. I don't even.
No brainer. Yeah. Pen it in.
Maybe my right back position. I'm starting Lazio right out the gate at right back.
Okay.
Of course, this is like the easy. The defense is super easy. Romagnoli, Casale, and Pellegrini for me. That's the back 4.
And that's your optimal. So you would see Lazzari in there?
Yes, that is optimal. That is like when we're, all cylinders going, like that for me is optimal.
So I would say a little bit different than you.
Figured, yeah.
And I got to put Marusic back there, just for his ability to play defense, which Lazzari often can find himself completely out of position.
Yeah.
I think Lazzari most certainly is an X factor type of player in Sadi's system, but I do not see him as a match week in and out starting 11 in this system. He is a player that can obviously find himself starting if need be, but especially because I have a feeling we're both going to have the same line of thought in our midfield, which is maybe going to be a little imbalanced. So for me, I gotta have Marusic playing that right back.
That's fair.
2 center backs, no brainer. Again, probably the best pairing last season in Serie A. And then left back, I think when we are running on all cylinders, I want to see Pellegrini as our starting left back.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think Did not get a ton of time last year, but for me, when he came in, he was incredibly impactful. He was dangerous. He's a player that can deliver a very nice ball into the box. Um, look, if we got Tati Castellanos in the match, you got a player that can obviously find his way, scoring goals in a lot of different areas, and brilliant with his head on the ball. And so for me, Luca Pellegrini, I want to see him develop. I want to see him find a lot of time in the starting 11. So
Yes.
let's go to midfield.
Midfield. I have, okay, for me, Cataldi, DM.
Okay.
Love what we saw from him last year. Really enjoyed watching his play last year. I'm gonna have Kamada as a more advanced sort of 10, and Rovella as the more box to box.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Luis Alberto, his time's done. His days are ticking.
Okay. So I will
Let me
say,
say real quick my thought process. For me, this is the
yeah,
most balanced midfield, and I will say this too. Analyzing some of Sadi's old midfields, especially the Napoli one, he had Hamsik and his name, the Polish attacking mid,
Zielinski.
Zielinski. His dual eights were Hamsik and Zielinski in that squad, and which are more. These are more two attacking guys. Like these are neither of them are really like defensive stalwarts. Like these are two pretty attacking players, and I don't think Sadi will stray away from being a little more progressive in those 8 positions. And I do think actually that this midfield is more balanced than the Napoli midfield that he had. Because for me, Casale, he does a job defensively, right? He's good enough defensively. He's disciplined. He can distribute pretty well. And then you have someone like Rovella, who is much more like a jack of all trades. He does everything. He does everything really well, and he can only improve in that aspect. And Kamada is not a defensive slouch. I want to make this very clear. I want fans to know and understand. Kamada was like he was in the top 95th percentile for tackles a game as an attacking mid. So he's no slouch. So I think this midfield is a lot more balanced than what people may think so initially. And so that's kind of my thought process behind the midfield.
So I'm glad we can have this discussion because they're two very different midfields.
Oh, that's fun, man.
So and for me, I think right now we're operating under the assumption that Luis Alberto is on the squad.
Correct.
Right? I think that is the mindset that I am having right now. That can clearly change. He can be sold to Saudi Arabia. We know there's offers out there, and I think I am perfectly okay. I don't want to see us lose a second starting midfielder so soon to the season starting after having lost Sergei Milinkovic-Savic.
Right.
But I think we are prepared because we have a player like Kamada.
Yeah.
But I think if we have Luis Alberto, for me, I think if we are at our best, and I love Cataldi. He's a Laziale. Absolutely, I think he is a player too that is underappreciated,
Yeah.
not by Lazio fans, but I think he's overlooked by Serie A fans.
Yeah.
We know, he's able to do a lot that goes unnoticed. But I think Rovella is ultimately going to supplant, at least if he is the player that I believe he is. I think he is going to be our regista. I think he's a player that does a lot of things well. He's certainly a player that can break through the lines with some passing, but I do think he has a little bit of grinta. I think he can handle some of the cleanup duty defensively, which allows us to have a Luis Alberto and a Kamada both on the field at the same time. And I think optimal starting 11 with Sadi clearly adjusting depending on how a match goes. But to your point, Sadi is okay with having two players, of the attacking mindset.
He is.
And points about Kamada are really, really strong. I also think Luis Alberto evolved last season as a player. He was a player that found some defensive duties. And I think that allowed him to find his place in the starting 11, right, which for months was the big question mark. Right. Why isn't Luis Alberto in the starting 11? Well, Sadi was really important that he had balance. He didn't see him and Sergei playing together. Well, ultimately, we found that it was just better to have both talented players on the pitch at the same time. And Sadi was able to get the defensive duties out of Luis Alberto, the minimum defensive duties that were required. I think Luis Alberto continues that evolution. And then again, to your point, Kamada does enough as well. And with the Rovella back there, I think that is at least what I want to see us get at. It is not, I believe, we'll start the season
No,
with.
yeah, I agree.
Rovella's not even on the team yet officially.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we'll see. But for me, the beauty of what we're looking at this season is a team that has depth in which there shouldn't be a massive drop off when looking at our registas.
Yeah.
Last year, when Cataldi didn't play, Marcos Antonio was not ready.
Yeah.
Nor do we even know if he is a regista.
Yeah.
Right. And so you saw the likes of Vecino in there because he was a safer player. He could do some of the defensive duties.
Yeah.
But he was not a player that was going to break a defense, with a pass.
Yeah.
And so it changed the dynamic of the team. I think the beauty here is between Cataldi and Rovella, you're not going to see us wildly change what our team looks like. So ultimately, that's what I think we'll see.
Okay.
So attack is the easy one. Like that to me, is probably one that I think we'll be on the same
page.
What is it? I'll start off. Then. Attack for me is obviously King Cheetah leads the line. A healthy Cheetah is the safest bet in the league when he's healthy, and so you'll see him up top. Another year older, coming off some health concerns. Can he bounce back? He has an opportunity to continue to make history in climbing the all-time Serie A goal scoring charts. I think he's at number 8 right now, but also, if he can find himself with another 20-goal season, he's going to be in an elite group of 2 or 3 players that have done that as many times as he has. So, leading the line, Ciro Immobile. Do you see a difference there?
Nah, Ciro, he'll hold it down. It's his to lose. It's his to lose.
Yeah, and look, he's again today it was a preseason match, but he looked sharp, which is all that you can really gauge a preseason match.
Yeah.
And is are they fit and do they look sharp? So, who do you have as the player playing out wide on the right?
I thought about this a little bit, and maybe a little bit of my MLS bias coming in. But at the end of the day, I was like, man, this guy put an absolute shift for us all year last season. There's no way that man can get dropped. Felipe has to go right wing.
You're telling me you considered the world in which Matthew was going to start on the right?
Hey, it was a really brief thought. To be fair, it came out pretty quickly. But I hesitated. I was like, nah, there's no way. And then, of course, I got me at left wing. Pretty easy.
Yeah, same. That one's an easy one. I think, again, Felipe on the right, consistency was something he was plagued with for many, many years. And last year, we saw the player that was consistent. I think what was interesting is at his first run at Lazio, there were nights that he was absolutely world class. I mean, he would look like one of the best players in the world. And there was a reason why the likes of Manchester United, were chasing him, and he had a 50 million plus evaluation or transfer market value on him. But then the gap between those performances and then some of his poor performances were quite wide. And so what we saw last year was probably fewer times in which he looked world class. I mean, but he became a consistent player that was able to close the gap between his best performances and his worst performances. And so for me, has earned the trust of Sadi. I think there's probably few, if no players that Sadi trusts more than Felipe Anderson. So that one's an easy one. And Zaccagni, is a player that the national team, the Azzurri, have been in absolute need of, which is why it's always been mind-blowing that he continues to not get called up, and hopefully that changes. But he's such a direct player, and he takes his man off the dribble, and he was the player that saw himself fouled more than any player in the league, was one of the top fouled players in all of Europe, and that's because he is a player again, that takes his man off the dribble, is super dangerous, is really strong with the ball, finds big goals when they're needed. And so, that one's an easy one. And I think with Felipe, and I mentioned this, there's he needs to have matches that he can take off, and that's where you look at an Isaacson hopefully being able to step up and provide a little something different there. So I think that is what our starting 11 each of us have as our optimal starting 11. Let's go into some of our predictions.
So
And we'll start.
Go ahead. Let me say this real quick. Before we go into these predictions, just one thing I want to say. I'll tell you one aspect from the sort of big wigs at the club that I think we've sort of come short on is actually preseason competition. I feel like we've had an incredibly easy preseason in terms of competition levels. That the one team that we played, and of course it's preseason. I get it. I get it. Though I would say that actually the two legit teams that we played, Girona, La Liga side, and Aston Villa, another side, we weren't too hot against. And again, it's preseason. We're trying. I totally get it. That's why you said I think we are going to have a slower start this season. However, I want to preface all this by saying that it's just that I am a little concerned with a little bit of the competition that we had in preseason. I would have liked to have like 4 good opponents. Even if we lose all of them, that would build you much better than going into preseason. But anyways.
Yeah. No. I mean, look, on preseason, because I think it's interesting. It's pretty standard in terms of the type of preseason matches Lazio generally plays.
Yeah, I get it.
Look, as two guys that live in the United States, we would both love to see them here and see them on an American tour. But I will add the positive is that these tours are as much about driving tickets and global branding, and there's a lot of distractions. These players, go to Hollywood and they go to Disney World and they've got interviews and social media stuff happening and obligations. And so, while you may see a Juve and Milan playing Real Madrid or Barcelona or playing each other in the Rose Bowl and it's big opponents, but there are a lot of distractions and the travel.
No, for sure.
They're coming out here and that travel, we know, having been so close to Major League Soccer, how challenging the travel is. Yeah. So while we're maybe not playing the strongest opponents, there's a rest factor. They're refreshed. They're not having to travel, across the pond, which I think is a positive.
That's a good point.
Let's dive into predictions.
Okay.
And we'll start with the big one right off the bat. Goal scoring leader, and what do you have as your goal tally for that player?
Okay, here we go. I'm sorry, nothing exciting on this one. Immobile, and I'm gonna go 24 goals this season.
Okay, I like it.
24 goals, yeah.
I like it. I'm gonna say Cheetah, and I'm gonna say 20 goals.
Okay.
And I would love to see, and I will classify this. Obviously, that's a little bit of a bounce back. Look, 20 goals in this league, it's
big deal.
It's scoff at. And I mentioned he has an opportunity to be one of a handful of players to score 20 or more goals as many times as he has.
Yeah.
And that's a huge tally. I will also say that I think I'm gonna also predict that Tati Castellano finds himself in double-digit goals scored.
Oh.
I'm going to say that you're going to see Cheeto at 20 goals, and then my prediction is that Tati Castellanos will be at 10 goals scored this season.
But that, if you're saying that, then that actually okay. Then if we're going for runner-up, is that your runner-up goal scorer?
Sure.
My runner-up goal scorer is Kamada.
Okay.
And I think he will hit 10 goals.
Okay. So I'm going to document this because we're going to come back and look at these predictions. So You've got 24 for Cheetah, and then you've got Kamada at how many?
10 goals as my runner-up goal scorer.
All right. Perfect. Now let's go with assists.
Oh, for me, I'm gonna go again Kamada, and I'm gonna go 11 domestic goals, 11 assists. Sorry.
11 for
Yeah.
Kamada. Okay. I'm going to say leading the team is going to be 10 Luis Alberto.
Okay. It seems a little safe pick, but okay.
No, because I think it's going to be another season in which it's probably spread
Oh
around.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
So I think it'll be pretty close between a few players, but I'll go with the tried and true
Right.
Luis Alberto. Okay, so we're looking at a season in which we've got a lot of sightings that we're really high on, and last year was another year in which picking this category was really really tough.
Mm.
Your prediction for best signing of the season on
I'm gonna
Lazio?
keep rolling with the guy I got in the back of my jersey this year. Come on.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think because we're signing this guy right into his prime, and I think he was playing in a Frankfurt system that was like it was attacking, but not nearly as suited to someone like him as it is, I think, in the Saudi system. And I think he will have some Hamsik level type numbers with Lazio in production. When he was at Napoli, was under Saudi again because they actually kind of remind me of each other. Their profiles are pretty similar. Both 6 foot, both pass first kind of guys. Both not really crazy dribblers. Both can have rockets of shots on them. So there's a lot of similarities between him and Hamsik that I think Saudi himself was pushing hard to get him for. I have a feeling. I don't know this for sure. I don't have sources in there, but I think that Kamada was very much handpicked because he has a very similar profile to maybe the best attacking midfielder that's played under Saudi in his career.
Okay.
So for that reason, Kamada.
So while I think this player was obviously, I mentioned Tati Castellanos scoring 10 goals, which would put you up there
Good.
for the season. This is how highly I think of, and again, I knock on wood because this hasn't even been finalized yet. But I'm going to say Nicolo Rovella.
Wow, that's a hot take.
Look, he's got to be close to being. If I think that he's going to be in our starting 11, in our optimal, and you have him in your starting 11 too, we just have him in different positions. If I have him supplanting Cataldi, and you would have him ahead of Luis Alberto, he's going to be doing something really, really, really well.
That's fair.
So for me, I have Rovella, and he is a player that at Monza last year played extremely, extremely well. Knows the league. It's just a matter of grasping Sadi's system, but he is a player that already is very familiar. So while a Kamada, again, plus still needs to adjust, I think Rovella can come in and do something really, really great. So let's look at, and so we're going to talk about breakout player, but I think let's talk breakout player. If it's anybody different for you, we've got best signing, but who do you think is going to be our breakout player that's a surprise maybe?
So by breakout player, are you saying like are you referring to youngsters particularly, or just anyone in the team that maybe when I think of breakout player, I think it has to be a player that's already been at the club?
Okay, let's say that. Yeah,
because
your unexpected player that looking back on it, it could also be categorized as a most improved player.
Yes. So for me, it has to be someone that's been at the club, and for me, my breakout player will be Pellegrini.
Okay.
He never got a shot in those 6 months, but he was studying, he was learning, he was starting to understand what Saudi recommends, what Saudi demands from that position, and I think that he'll be primed to have a big year playing for his home team, the team he grew up loving. He'll bring that passion, and I think he will be on. We saw him training in the offseason. He's been putting in work in this offseason. He has no days off. He looks like he's been really active. He looks incredibly motivated. And again, playing for your home team, your childhood team, there's no greater motivator. And I think Pellegrini will really pop off this year and have not just a breakout season for him, for us, a breakout season for him in his career, because I don't think Pellegrini has yet to sort of reach the heights or the level that everyone thought he would reach when he was 18, 19 years old.
So he was the pick that I had as well. So, I I don't know that I can choose anybody else. I'm going to try, and I'll say on paper when we come back to looking at this, Pellegrini was also my choice.
Yeah, fair.
I think
Hey, how about this too? It can be a new signing if it's a younger player. Because I do think that breaking out into the Serie A scene is maybe
well then I would say if I mean Tati young enough?
24. I don't know. I feel like Tati had a bit of a breakout season. Even like, nah, I would say Tati's pretty established, like in world. I think in like soccer in general.
You think
I
so?
think he is. I
Okay.
think I get all
I mean,
that.
he's still 2 seasons. He's still a little over a season removed from playing in Major League
I
Soccer.
did, but like, I mean, I think people know. I think his name is on the map now after that Madrid game and having a really good season with the team that should have been relegated, but in fact actually had quite a competitive season in La Liga. And he was a big part of the success. So I, I'm going to disqualify him. Sorry.
Okay. Well, look, I think then it's really running out of options because when I look at who I feel strongly about or youngsters on our team that are potential candidates, you've got the likes of Cancellieri. Cancellieri is already linked to a
Yeah,
move,
yeah.
so there's a good chance he's probably playing at Empoli. We look at another talented youngster, Marcos Antonio. Does does he have a place on the team with Rovella coming in, and then other midfielders like Kamada, and so Luca Romero is gone.
Marcos Antonio.
Um, well, no, I mentioned
Oh,
Marcos
my bad.
Antonio, but I don't think he has a spot. It's hard for me seeing him playing at a regista
Mm.
role or ahead of Vecino or so for me that's one that I was pretty high on him, but I just don't think he fits in the system. So of the choices given, I will say let's go with Lazzari as having a breakout
I like that. I
season,
like that.
improvement on last year. Look, I think he can be an X
Yeah.
factor. I think his service can be a little bit spotty, but we know he's a player that if a match is open, you're chasing a goal, he can provide a threat. So purposes of this, I'll go ahead and say
Okay.
Lazzari. All right, so your team MVP at the end of the season.
So this is tough. Because assuming my prediction of 24 goals for Cheeto kind of locks him in as that, doesn't it? However,
Well, not
well,
necessarily,
yeah,
because
this is
look,
this is
yeah,
our
we've
point.
had seasons that he was bagging goals, and you've had the likes of Milinkovic Savic looking at as the team MVP, or you can argue a season in which Luis Alberto broke the Serie A assist record could have been factored in at that as well. So
So with that said, I'm gonna stay on the hype train here and gonna
right,
go
I
with
knew it.
Kamada again. And I'm
Okay,
gonna go with that because I have my prediction is he's gonna have 10 goals, 11 assists, double digit goals assist season for Lazio in his first season. And obviously, as a midfielder, he impacts the game more so than a striker in most cases, right? And I think he'll be not only will he do that, but he'll also put in some impressive defensive numbers. That even with those like high kind of scoring tallies, I think he'll be just I think he will announce himself. He's already announced himself globally, you know, with Bundesliga, but I think that in Serie A, he's going to be in contention for that MVP spot. And I think for us, he'll get it.
I mean, we haven't even gotten to the hot take section, and you're coming with fire. So I'm gonna go with a player we have not even talked about as my MVP, and that's gonna be Alessio
Yeah, I
Romagnoli.
saw it.
For me, look, uh, Cheeto is our capitano, our vice capitano, and Sergei Milinkovic Savic is gone. I think he's a Laziale.
Mm,
This is another season. He was massive last year. He changed the tune of the Lazio defense, provides stability. He is going to have another season like
yeah.
that, and I think you're going to see another year in which he takes a step forward in confidence, knows his place at the team, is in that absolute prime window for a center back. So for me, knowing how attack minded our top players are,
Yeah.
he is going to have to be that security blanket in the back.
Good
So for
shout.
me,
It's a good shot.
yeah,
Sure.
MVP is going to be
He's
Romagnoli.
one of my favorites on the team, so I'm totally down for that. Monster.
Okay, let's go top 6 predictions, Caleb.
All
You're going to
right,
kick us off.
here we go.
Let's go. Do you want to go from 6 to 1, or is it
Yeah,
easier?
we'll do 6-1. We'll do 6-1. Okay,
Okay.
my number 6, Atalanta.
Wow. Okay.
Number 5, Juve.
Let me write
Right,
this.
right.
Let's
I got
see.
it down. I can text it to you.
Okay.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I will face the shame if it's completely terrible freezing take. Juve.
So
5th.
6 Atalanta,
Yeah.
5 Juve.
Juve. 4th, Inter. People are super high on
Wow.
Inter.
Okay.
I think they're actually going to take a dip this next year.
Okay.
3, Lazio.
Okay.
The boys will finish 3rd, top 4. 2nd, Napoli. 1st, Milan.
Wow. Okay.
Do I need to elaborate on it? I'll do a quick.
Yeah. Let's hear it. Give it quick.
I will elaborate a bit on my top 3 at least.
That'll give me some time because
all right.
I am still. This season is going to be crazy. I think
it's fun. It's super fun. I can't wait. My reasoning behind first of all, Milan winning the league is that I think they've lost Tonali, but I think they have gone in and filled in a lot of spots that were lacking last season. Not that the players that they lost weren't downgrades. Like Rebic was not the same player he was 2 or 3 years ago when he was really popping off. I think that Milan has gotten stronger. I think that Milan also has the continuity. They've gotten stronger, but they also still have a lot of their core players where they can still have a good connection, have good chemistry. It's not a new 11, right? These guys can still pick up where they left off from and continue to go and perform well. And I think the new signings would just elevate that, what they could do. I think that Leon and Pulisic will prove to be quite a scary duo in Serie A. And I think that they'll win the league because of it. And then for Napoli, they lost Kim Min-jae. They lost the best center back in the league last season, arguably one of the top 5 center backs in the world in terms of performances last season. I think that's a huge loss, and I cannot see them being as productive goal-wise as they were last year. I think last year was very much a mystical, divine season for them. And I don't think they can replicate it again, but I still think they still have most of the core pieces. So they're still going to be good. And the coach, right? The coaching situation is a little weird. So that for me, I put them down to 2nd place. And then Lazio, I think, will finish in 3rd. And I think we will be better than – I strongly believe we'll be better than Inter, Juventus, and Atalanta.
So there's a lot to unpack. This is such an interesting, and the window is still open. That's what makes this a little bit challenging.
Yes.
And so it's tough. I will say, I think I have Atalanta at number 6. I think that is one that I probably feel better starting off with.
Okay. Yeah. So I have
and I love their window. And I think they're going to be a team that threatens, and I think that it's going to be very close.
Yes.
And look, I'm going to already tease this for my predictions. We both have Roma outside of the
absolutely right
outside of European spots.
Hey.
And last year I actually had in my preseason prediction, I had Roma ahead of Lazio, but I did have them outside of the top 4. Everybody was talking, Romanisti always like to talk about Scudetto as their predictions. And you had a lot of that. And you had a lot of journalists, a lot of pundits. Oh, guaranteed Roma's going to challenge. Roma's top 3, top 2, guaranteed Champions League spot. And I had them outside. And another prediction I had last year was Napoli in the top 4. And a lot of people were down on Napoli because of the turnover, seeing the likes of Koulibaly, Insigne, Mertens all gone. And I thought they had a tremendous transfer window. So I was pretty confident in them finishing in the top 4. They obviously blew open those expectations in winning the league by a wide margin. So I have Roma outside of European spots. Look, they don't have a striker. With Tammy out hurt, Belotti didn't score a goal last season, and so they're a team that while I like Awar, I think they just have so much still left to do. They're a weaker team than they were last year,
Yes.
and they were behind not just us, but they were outside of the top 4 spots last year. So Atalanta, I think, is probably an improved team,
Yes.
but slightly behind. Like, here's the questions for me with each team, because I think each team has some pretty big questions about them. Napoli, you mentioned it, the loss of Kim Min-jae, arguably the best center back in Serie A last year. That's a big one, right? And Napoli fans can say, well, we lost Koulibaly the year before, and we were able to replace him.
Yeah.
Man, it's fair, but is that going to happen again?
I go twice. Ooh, I don't know about that.
That's tough, right? Even if the player that can come in and perform admirably, like asking him to be the best center back is going to be really, really tough.
Yes.
Losing Spalletti, that's a big that's a massive change.
Dude.
And I do not rate Rudy Garcia. So, that's a challenge. But I will say, they still have Osimhen and they still have Cavaradonna.
That's right. That's right.
2 players that are incredible. Kvaratskhelia is going to be entering his 24th year. He's a 24-year-old player. I mean, you've got 2 absolute world-class players. Yep. In Osimhen, you can argue he's probably a top 3 striker in the world. And so for me, just having those 2 players makes that attack absolutely formidable.
Yes.
And so, it's tough. How much do I dock them for the loss of Kim Min-jae and their manager? And then looking at Milan last year had so many question marks, and I feel like they had this probably the strongest window.
Yes.
But a lot of players that are going to take some time to adjust. Is Pulisic high on him? Can be a good player. Needs to stay healthy. He hasn't done that in quite some time. Yunus Musa, still young player that would have loved to have seen at Lazio, but still a player that's going to have to adjust to this league. Tactic. Chukwueze coming from outside of the league, like it's going to take a little bit of time, and so you're still hoping that a lot of these players hit. Milan doesn't have a top striker. Leao, dangerous as heck, is going to find goals, but who's going to be leading the line for Milan? I think, is it going to be Giroud? And then looking at Juve, I think is really interesting because Timothy Weah is pretty much all they've done. Right. And I think he's going to be a really interesting player and what'll probably be a wingback role for them, but still massive questions. Like, is Dusan Vlahovic still their striker, or are they going to end up making a move for a Lukaku, which under Allegri in short term, I think can work. But I think the interesting thing with Juve is they're going to be playing in essentially one competition. Let's say 2 with Coppa Italia, but I think that gives them a big advantage.
It does, yeah.
I mean, it can't be understated. So for me, that's another interesting one. And then Inter. Inter, I think right now, given their window, I think they are worse than last year.
I agree.
Losing Onana. I mean, look, Summer is a really strong keeper and has been really great.
Yeah.
But Onana is in terms of Inzaghi ball is the type of player that he loves. I don't think there's a better keeper in the world at playing the ball with his feet and being essentially an 11th field player. than Onana. And so losing him, losing Brozovic, those are big deals. And right now, they have Thuram, but they losing that connection of Lukaku with Lautaro and not having that striker sealed. Like they've been linked to Balogun. It doesn't look like that's going to be happening. They were linked to Scamacca. That didn't happen. So Samardic deal looks like it's not going to go through for them. So I think they're a little bit worse than they were last year, and they were wildly inconsistent.
Yeah.
And so I say all that to say it's there for Lazio to take.
It is.
And I don't want to talk Scudetto by any means, but it's there in terms of fighting for a spot in the top 4. It is honestly the biggest crapshoot. And so it's so hard for me to stake a claim. So
let's hear it.
I wrote it down and I don't love it yet. And so I'm going to say what it is here. And then then I may, again, when the window closes, I'll probably tweet out a more concrete, like I'm going to stake my claim to it. But right now, what I have is Atalanta at 6, Inter at 5, Lazio at 4, Juve at 3, Milan at 2, and Napoli with a back-to-back. Back-to-back.
Wow.
It's so tough because you mentioned a little bit of like the fate last year, and there was something magical, and they had to get over the hump. So I don't even feel great about that because there was a lot, but they dominated the league last
over Lazio. Crazy.
Look, I just playing in one less competition.
Yes,
I just think it's Lazio is going to be there's a lot of focus that's required of Champions League and playing in that extra match. And while Allegri can get crapped on, I think that I think you have to we're underplaying how much of a deal it is. I think Juve, in terms of accepting punishment from UEFA, were thrilled to give up Conference League to play in one competition as their ban. So yeah, look, and I still think that something's going to happen, but look, Chiesa, I think could have a bounce back season. Weston McKennie, look, we say preseason, it was preseason, but has looked decent for them. I don't think he's going to be like a major impact player, but I just think the focus on the one comp is going to make a big deal. So let's go to our one hot take, and then we'll get into some questions that we got. Start us off, Caleb. What is your one hot take? And it may have already been said here, but let's hear what the one hot take is for you.
My one hot take is that Lazio will be the highest scoring team in Serie A.
Wow, I like it.
That is my hot take.
I like it.
I think. Okay. I think we brought in. Yeah, I think we're going to really start clicking, and I think we're going to be scoring a lot of goals this season. And I think Cheetah will have a bounce back season, obviously aiding us in that as well. And I think for that reason, we'll be the highest scoring team in Serie A.
Love it. So that's a really, really good one. And I think for me, I said it was probably a little bit of a hot take in terms of Tati Castellanos scoring 10 goals. So if I will say for us, it's that we're going to finish in the round of 16 in Champions League.
Ooh. I feel like, I don't know. That's a lukewarm take, I feel.
You think so?
I think so. I think that'll be the bare minimum. Maybe that's not a hot take for me. I think
that's a hot take. I think
for me, round of 16 is like no doubt about we'll make round 16. No doubt about it.
I mean, that's a hot take.
Maybe it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, getting out of a group, and there's no group draw yet to even know.
Yeah.
It's really, really tough. So Yeah, I'd say, look, Tati scoring 10 goals, I think, is a hot take.
Mhm.
I think if Cheeto is out, you're going to see a really, really impressive campaign from Tati Castellanos. But this has been good. I know, Caleb, you've got to jump
Yeah, I did. Sorry.
here, so I'll answer some of these questions. I know we had some questions coming in, so I want to make sure to get those for the folks listening. But look, if any more signings happen, we'll be sure to jump on. We'll be doing some stuff post match reactions as well, and be on the lookout for spaces probably during some of the half times of matches coming up. So, Caleb, we'll talk soon and catch up. And I'll let you jump off here and I'll answer some of these questions.
Bring on the season. I'm pumped.
Let's do it. Let's do
I'm
it.
excited. Peace.
Later. So some of the questions we have here, look, and we've covered a lot of them. One of them, coming from Secret Samadhi on Twitter, asking about our new signings, particularly mentioning Isaacson. What do I think is needed to complete our roster? Got a couple questions here as well from our fans on YouTube asking about any other potential signings. In terms of completing the roster, we need another Mezzala. I think we need a player that can be a little bit more of a box to box, a number 8 for us. Basic just isn't the player. And so I think you're going to see the club looking to move Basic for somewhere between 8 to 10 million. And I think if that happens, you're going to see an incoming signing that I think will help close our window. I'd love to see a center back position. The questions of, Stevie BK, shout out to Stevie on Twitter. He's asking if Sadi will rotate more. I think we've seen an evolution of Sadi, particularly, when you think about Sadi during his time at Napoli, he was a manager that was really hard pressed to rotate his squad. I think ultimately that was probably the undoing of some of those Napoli teams, as they were in tight races, not able to get it through the finish line. Maybe that came from a lack of rotation and players tiring out a little. I think you've seen a Sadi that is much better at doing that than he has in the past, certainly last season. We talk about Felipe Anderson as being a player that needs to be rotated. Ultimately, that's going to happen if the players perform. Isaacson, if he can come in, look, what I really liked about Sadi last year is he gave guys like Cancellieri a chance. And Cancellieri, to his own admission, didn't capitalize on those chances and wasn't able to earn more minutes. And so I think Sadi is going to give the likes of Isaacson an opportunity. I think he's going to give players like Kamada big opportunities. And he's already doing so in preseason. So, I think we have a little bit more depth, which is going to allow us to rotate. So I think, I feel a lot more confident in his ability to rotate and continue to do that. So, and I think Mike Vittner had asked the same question about how many more signings do we need? Another right back, another midfielder or two. Again, it's got to be another midfielder. And then in a perfect world, if we were able to get another center back, we have not been linked to any center backs. But I think for us, we would need to address that position. Ultimately, I think from the right back position, you're not going to see too much movement. I think, between Marusic being able to play there and then Lazzari, I think we're in an okay position. So, we covered a lot. This is obviously an exciting time of year as we get ready to kick off here in a week against Lecce, and a ton of expectations around this club. They've announced over 28,000, close to 29,000 season tickets sold at the Stadio Olimpico. So, the fans in Rome are excited. They're ready for this campaign, as are we. So excited to talk more about this with you all as we progress, we get into the season. Thanks for tuning in. As always, sempre forza